I keep seeing this loop, right? Where, and it started with DeepSeek. It was like, okay, well, we've got these very, very complex, very sophisticated AI models, and these are the things at this power, at this compute level, and this cost, and this margin that people are concerned about was going to take their jobs, or radically change the way that they live life. And then here comes DeepSeek, and this team is, first of all, it's a team on the younger side. I don't think there was anybody on that team that was
a very young team.
I actually don't think any of them were over the age of 25, I want to say.
Yeah, no, it's a very young group of engineers. And I mean, utilizing just, very out-of-date hardware compared to like what we're using, is insane to me, because, we're over here, we're like, oh, we need all these new chips, we need all these new graphics cards to run all these models. And they're like, oh, we're using a very old model that you all haven't used, or like an old graphics card that you all used 5 years ago.
And that's and I think it was something like under $3 million worth of funding as far as capital development that was behind the team. I've used it myself. It takes a little bit longer because it wants to explain itself better, is my impression right now. And I keep saying to myself, and we were just talking about, before we came on, Claude, Claude, the
Anthropic.
Anthropic. And then Claude, Clawd.
Yes, Claude bot.
An AI assistant coming out, very, very powerful. And apparently this guy has moved over to OpenAI because they sent the legal team after him. And now, while that is all going on, while this major development is going on, there's a Chinese sort of equivalent, PicoClaw, the hardware for Claude bot was $200. This hardware is $10. This can run on a USB. This can run on a USB output, I believe. But it stripped all the core features. And my question is always like, why? A lot of times the democratization of those use cases means that, like, a lot of times American developers end up running wild with it and creating all these new things. But I always wonder to myself, why does that sort of democratization always happen outside of the US, in particular in China, but sometimes in India and other places? What's going on here? And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is because you might have a perspective on this, not just from a technical standpoint, because you do have that expertise, but also from the, you meet a guy in a bar sometimes and he talks very straightforwardly about his industry. You might have a chance at more of these encounters. So I wanted to get your perspective on that in particular.
Yeah, no, I mean, appreciate you having me on, obviously. But I think in regards to like DeepSeek and obviously like countries that have built up their own AI models, that kind of like the stand-up flagship. Like when you think of a Chinese AI model and you're not in China, you're going to think of DeepSeek. I'm trying to think of the one for India. It doesn't come to me off the top of my head, but a lot of these, when it comes to like the democratization of these models, from what my experience is outside of, the United States and our techno bubble, that runs through Silicon Valley and the rest of the country.
Right.
When it comes to being outside of the United States, you'll always have those one-offs. Everyone will have their own stand-up model that is kind of like, when you think of a country that has an AI model, this is the one you're going to think of. Typically for us, when I think it was around 2022, I'd already had access to ChatGPT for longer than the general public had. And, ChatGPT had been around for a while at that point. But just not a lot of people knew about it. Sam Altman hadn't publicly talked about it. It had been working around the back. My point is, OpenAI, ChatGPT, those became like, when you think of, United States and you think of our AI, like, if you could assign an AI to every country, for a while you could say, oh, it's ChatGPT, it's OpenAI. But for us now, I feel like it's a race, obviously. Yeah. You have Gemini, you have Claude, you have ChatGPT, and you'll have those one-offs every once in a while. It's like Claudebot, that's one-off. It's something completely different from the rest, but it's its own little kind of signature feature that's not really built for a chat, but built to just run wild. And that's like kind of going back to my point of like, these countries have their own little AIs. Like everyone has like their own stand-up flagship model. The one you think of when you're like, oh, let me compare myself, like my model, to different countries. Who's the front runner? Who do I need to be worried about? So I think it comes down to competitors. Is like those people that then stand up, like that stand above the rest, are the competitors that you're going to think of when you look at AI models in different countries.
So one of the big places that I went, both in just like public policy education, in some vectors with this podcast, is just like, okay, it's all about use case development. Developing technology is good, but okay, how do we deploy these things in our daily life? And two questions come to mind in particular. When we talk about these sovereign AI models. By the way, everybody, Alex Allen here, data scientist, AI and strategy generalist, a developer on the cutting edge of all things technology. But so the first part of that is, when you think about, especially when you service delivery in governments, whether it's in the developed world and the developing world, they want to use AI to improve the efficiency, improve the capacity to deliver these services. Okay. To what extent is it possible? Like, for example, to what extent is it possible for me as a policymaker to say, okay, I want to take the basic pieces of this AI that is not native to me, construct a new AI native to what I'm trying to do, and deploy that for the general use cases for as far as what a government is going to have to do. Healthcare is one that comes to mind a lot. One of the reasons I was very big on blockchain in grad school is I saw the use cases as far as special purpose vehicles, as far as finance, as far as anti-corruption measures. Where does that line start in terms of like, okay, well, the bare bones of this came elsewhere. It came from another nation. It came from a firm that is not native to you. And therefore there's always going to be a layer of trust that is just not going to be fully acquired, versus, okay, we can take the foundations here, and as long as you build on it from, let's say, step 2 of a million steps, or step 5 or step 10, you still have something that is robust, usable in your national context, and we can still rely on and say, hey, yeah, this is ours. I hope I'm asking a question that makes sense. I hope I'm delivering this question in a way that makes sense. Am I? Let me know if I'm not.
I would say reframe it, because I think I know what you're asking, but I just want to make sure.
If I'm a government minister in an emerging, in a developing economy, or even in like a middle income country, I want to improve my economy. I want to improve my service delivery. I'm seeing and I see this a lot with people, with international students. Their governments are like, I'm seeing the successes that my international students can have elsewhere. I want to empower more of this type of person domestically. Am I fully able to do this in a secure way, taking the bare bones of somebody else's model and trying to build on that to build my own? Or is this something where I have to come from the foundations in order to build these capabilities?
I mean, personal experience, and from what I know, I would say, I think it's always better to build from the ground up, because you know what you get, like, and you can test cases. I forget where it was, somewhere in Southern Asia. Governments have been deploying, their own versions of AIs for specific use cases, like you were saying. So for some, obviously, like we know in Asia, there's some that go off facial recognition. They use computer imaging. Once you see that person's face one time, and you can start to see it again and again, it gets better accuracy. And if you want to improve, so for this instance, we're gonna say, let's say, I want to track everyone. I want to track everyone in my country. They walk around, you put up a bunch of cameras, you're going to try to capture everyone's face. But, you're going to want to capture their face, but you're also going to capture their ears, because your ears can tell you the whole story about the person. Because everyone's ears are just so slightly unique that you can, a computer image model can tell. We've tested that before. We've seen that it works. We've been able to tell people who they are just by their ears, by their ear shape. So, like, I think, it really just depends on, what it's being used for. For surveillance, it's been prevalent for a while now. But I think when it comes to, say like a random middle income country, like, I feel they would have the best, success honestly, if they were to build their own, like, because that is one thing I will always encourage is, build your own test case, see what you can do. Because I think, it allows, like, when you build your own, it really allows you to understand the problem better. Instead of, you could hire, BCG, you could hire Deloitte to come in, and they're going to, and you know what, if they're going to bring in an AI, they're going to bring in Copilot, they're going to bring whatever they want. And that is inherently going to be biased towards, their own standing back home of what it was built on. Because no matter what you say, AI is going to be biased in some way, shape, or form towards how it was originally built. You can do all you want to, try to sway it and not make it hallucinate. But I really think when it comes down to it, like, I am one to always say, build your own test case, test over and over until you can get something that shows results for yourself and, for your people. So that I would say that's my recommendations for a lot of people is test, build your own. We built our own in undergrad. I built my own in undergrad. They completely pivoted the entire last year of curriculum because of ChatGPT. They said, we want you all to be prepared for the future. We spent the entire year like building our own, learning how to do it, just to be prepared for the future. And that's one thing I'll always preach is, build, test, discover all these new things. And I would implore people to, look into these things because, you could have a bad model 6 months ago. You could have a terrible model 6 months ago, and you could have bad experience with it. In the gap of 6 months, so much will have already improved. We see headlines today. Like, I'm sure you've probably seen them. Yeah, 6 to 12 months, guys, everyone's out of a job. 12 to 18 months, guys, everyone's out of a job if you're a white collar worker, if you do any of this repetitive stuff. And, I would say I see that in my own workplace. I have taken, some of just the bare, repetitive stuff I do and I've completely automated it. I let Claude just do it for me. And, that's a model that's been built off of, so much stuff that we know that is native to us in the United States. But, for someone that's in, France, it could be completely different of what they're trying to do, what they're trying to understand and what makes sense to them that allows them to, really put together the whole puzzle.
There is a big, and I'm glad that I'm glad you bring up some of the things you bring up, because one of the things I want to talk about is like this big flattening that is going on where like it starts with, you go on social media, online communities where if this makes sense, if you've been online for a while, you've noticed that communities that did not used to intersect are now intersecting, and the general public is sort of swirling up in a lot of other topics and sectors that normally would not have been something that's, Joe Sixpack, as you might call him, might have interacted with. One of those things I think is prediction markets. And I think that, we've talked before about, your own personal use case. We've joked about it, you make a little money. Hey, that's one thing. But these things do originate in the intelligence community. They are something that we're sort of a credibility building vehicle there. And, we have this collapsing in and overlapping. We have financial markets collapsing and overlapping. Crypto, financial markets, prediction markets, everything's sort of gamified at the press of a button. And, it is now at the point where if you want to interact with these things, you are inherently interacting with something that is a child of the intelligence community. That might make some people uneasy. Tell me your perspective on this as somebody who has worked in intelligence, as somebody who, sort of has to use machine learning to gather up this data, gather up these sentiments, and sort of analyze what the implications are for these things. You've worked with automations, you built these things before. Tell me how these things sort of shake out as, again, Joe Sixpack gets a hold of.
I mean, obviously, when it comes to prediction markets, like you said, it's all intelligence based. And I know we were talking previously before we started, we saw, literally just this past week, we saw 2 Israeli soldiers get arrested for, classified information that they used to bet on Polymarket. And that's the intelligence community right then and there. I mean, those are people that have classified information, that the Pentagon has shared with them, that, their own government has shared with them, and they've used it to make money. And that's all this kind of is, in the sense of, I think one thing that really speaks volume to me is, I forget who it is, I forget the guy's name, but he was able to predict Donald Trump's pick for the vice president based off of his language on Polymarket. He was able to understand and pick. He knew JD Vance was going to be picked based off of the language and the intelligence that he was able to gather from speech. And that's the power that I think some of these prediction markets hold, is some people are so tapped into it that they can just tell by the language that you're using to really understand, build a model, and, you know, make a decision that, you know, could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. But some of these people have practiced it, or they've been in the field for so long that they just know at this point, that they know what's going to happen because they've experienced it, you know, or I would say they have enough data to back it up. I would say that's like one of the key things that always speaks to me, because his interview to me really struck with me of just like, I go off the language. I don't go off the person's body for, you know, how they're feeling. I go off the language. The language will tell you everything.
This is an interview with who?
I forget the guy's name.
Oh, okay.
I forget his name, but I saw originally, like way back last year, just going based off language. I mean, that's intelligence right there. Words can describe and reveal to you so much if you look at them, you know, word by word, letter by letter. I think that's one of the biggest things, especially, you know, in, you know, natural language processing models. Like, you know, back then and when I was in school, I mean, if you got like above a 30 to 40% on a natural language processing model, you jumped for joy. That was good. Because, you know, you had people that were just getting like 3%, 4%. You know, I used Claude the other day. I got a 75%.
Wow.
And that's just
comparatively, even.
Yeah.
Like, even without the frame of reference, comparatively, that's.
Yeah, no, like a 75%, that is amazing. And, you know, last time I did, you know, that test, I mean, it had been a while. It had been almost like a few years ago. And I mean, going from like 40% to 75, you know, like that saved me so much time today. So, I mean, I really think, like, you know, when it comes to these prediction markets, you know, the intelligence, I think it is all so intertwined, like today in this point, it's so gamified to the point, like, you know, there's a lot of desensitization to it. Like, a lot of people are desensitized to it, of like, oh, this is real intelligence. Like, you know, you can see, you know, if I loaded up Polymarket right now and I pulled up the politics spot, I can guarantee you there's probably over a 50% chance, you know, I see something insane just based off of a statement someone made today.
You know, there's like the straightforward, like, logical side that you look at something with, and then then you turn your BS detector on and you see what's going on, and you diagnose, you run the stethoscope over the entire body, and, you know, you see what's going on. And one of the things with prediction markets, I saw a lot of the backlash, and, you know, and I cannot say that I did not agree because I don't engage with them personally. I'm somebody who's interested in markets in general, so I'll engage with, you know, what is the role that these things are playing in the wider zeitgeist. I see you smiling, man. But I'm not somebody who gambles on these things personally. And, you know, there's always that brass tacks moment where things are cut. You cut through all the BS, especially in a policy context where it was like, oh my God, prediction markets and the effect on young men and all the other things that are going on with young men. And then you see the share of bets on the prediction markets, and you see how wide the sports prediction markets are. And then you realize it's like, oh, it's not about the prediction markets and what the effects they might have on the public. You want the sports betting out because that's supposed to be in this domain. Yeah. That's supposed to be property of the sports books. And here's the thing. I'm not mad at it because I am interested in the implications that could go on as far as when all that stuff is stripped out. When the sort of, not to say that the layman's opinion doesn't matter, but when the layman's stuff is stripped out, when the guy who's only there to bet on sports is out, and now it's about geopolitical incidences and, you know, and these other things. Of course, we don't want to be betting on death, but why is this guy betting $150,000 on this very, very obscure event? It's a sense, you know, I saw a quote one time that said that public markets are where insiders go to cash out to the general public. And, you know, that's still true here, but there's also this element of like revealing those threads that could not be revealed through a typical process because there's no financial incentive on the other side.
No, I think you're right, because like I think one thing that speaks volume to me is I have Polymarket loaded up on my phone right now. I could scroll through here and on the...
By the way, I'm listening to you, but I want to bring up something else after this. Keep going. But
on a moment's notice, I could be scrolling on here. I'll just scroll on here really quickly. The first few things that I see, us striking Iran, U.S. striking Iran. You know, people are betting, you know, before the end of the year. People are betting June. People are betting tomorrow. You scroll down more, you get the Fed decision. You know, you have people gambling on the Fed decision, and there's a live one of Bitcoin where the price is going to be at 5 minutes from now, up or down. And you have
5 minutes.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes, and there's a 51% chance that it's up. And I think, you know, you scroll down these more and more, I think there's more information you can dilute. So, you know, there's some on here that, you know, we'll look at these, and, you know, there's a lot of sports, there's a lot of politics, and there's a lot of like breaking news. And like one thing I typically like to watch, which it's kind of a giveaway, is I like to watch on Polymarket when people predict the next AI model will come out for certain AIs.
What qualifies as next?
So let's say
relative to, because a guy could be making an AI model as we speak.
Yes, no, I agree. So, you know, just the other week, Claude launched, you know, version through, like, I think it was like 3.6 Sonnet. It's the newest version of theirs. You could probably have gambled on Polymarket of, you know, when is this coming out? And if you were able to watch, you know, the CEO give a speech at a private conference, you know, or just a public conference, and, you know, just watching that language to distill the information of like, oh, we have something new coming soon. You know, one of the big things I saw was actually, I forget when it was. It was a few months ago, actually. People were betting on when Gemini 3.0 would come out. A lot of people had the date right on the mark.
Wow.
Now,
but were these confirmed to be insiders, or was this?
See, that's the thing. It's up for speculation. Is, you know, these people were right on the date. I forget the exact date, but they were. I ended up looking at it. It was like, you know, some people were saying, oh, this Friday. You know, the Friday would have been like, I don't know. Some people were saying like, oh yeah, it's gonna be October like 12th or something like that. And all these people were wrong, well, like, you know, super wrong. But the closer we got to the end of the year, I saw a large amount of capital get consolidated onto one date, and everyone was all in on like the one specific date because they knew that it was the information. They knew, you know, and, you know, I go back to like, you know, what I said earlier, you know, about, you know, those two soldiers getting arrested. It's, you know, how much can you tell? How much do you know? And I think these prediction markets have also allowed us to a point of like instability of, you know, a lot of people are under economic stress right now across the world. And, you know, who says, you know, I put down, for example, if I wanted to gamble on when the next, you know, ChatGPT model would come out. And if I knew ahead of time and I was, you know, in very dire financial distress, I'm on the verge of losing my house. You know, thankfully, you know, that isn't the case. You know, some people, they'll do drastic things to, you know, be able to just live.
Yeah.
And that's the things with these prediction markets is I think it's enabled such a large part of society to act on information that is relevant within their domain. And I think that is abhorrently true. Like, it is so true. You know, when I talk about, you know, Gemini, people were right on the money. You can't tell me that, I don't know, X amount of Google employees didn't know that Gemini 3.0 was going to come out on a specific date.
I can tell you, I have a friend who works at a certain place, and sometimes he says things and they happen. You know,
exactly. I have friends that do the exact same thing. Funny enough, you know, they're like, oh, you know, man, be crazy if this would happen. 8 hours from now, wow, dude, look what happened.
You know, and that's it's one of those things. You know, I'm very fascinated with like the incubator of things. I really like to, and unfortunately, it's somewhat, it can be, I guess, construed as like an American exceptionalist perspective, but I like seeing the results of these like radical experiments that go on in other countries in terms of governments and technology. I believe it was it Armenia that had the AI in parliament. I think there's some country that has an AI in parliament. There was one in which, well, regardless of that, the one I really wanted to bring up to you was this Cambodian framework here. So in Cambodia, you are paying in US dollars via a Cambodian blockchain developed by the Japanese using a Chinese app interconnected with a payment system owned by the Canadians.
Your Lord.
You know, it's there's a very big depth there, but there is, you know, I guess a sort of a roundabout way to ease there. As far as the future of financial transactions, as far as the future of streamlining payments, as far as cross-border payments, is the future these cross-cutting sort of things, in your opinion, as somebody who has had to grow up in a world where people are like, hey, we're casting off the old regional or the old unipolar sense of the world, and things are going to be a lot more regional now. How sustainable are these things in a changing world order, do you think? I'm putting my Ray Dalio hat on now.
I would say in terms of sustainability, I mean,
and I really want your perspective on that as somebody who like has to come up with it among this being their peers. For example, your peers in, can't remember what it was. There was one country where the youth voted via Discord.
Oh, Nepal.
Nepal, yeah. They voted via Discord for their new presidents. Mm-hmm. This is a radical new change, and there's a lot of problems, but there's a lot of potential problems, but there's a lot of potential, you know, innovations necessary there. Mm-hmm. How do you look at that as somebody who is basically their counterpart in another country?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think I want to go back here a little bit. So, in the timeline of, you know, we've been in the greatest technological leap in human history.
Definitely.
In the past.
Easily.
In the past 2 decades, we've come so far, you know. So first off, I want to say the internet. The internet was the one thing that gave the world access to talk to each other. Now, I want to say AI is the thing that's, you know, we were running, but now we're sprinting.
Right.
You know, 6 months from now, AI is going to look different. 6 years from now, AI is going to look different. Hopefully we have AGI by then. You know, you never know. I would say in terms of these other countries, I want to kind of get involved with the aspect of like AI as, you know, a lot of these places are going to implement it, you know, financially. You were saying like, you know, a lot of these, you know, financial, you know, the blockchain, like they were saying the other day, AI will be able to crack the blockchain one day. It will be able to understand it and be able to see what is happening in there in real time.
I don't mean to interrupt, but one of the things that I was looking at, I was really big into emerging technology policy in grad school. I remember learning a little bit more about quantum computing, learning about the qubit versus the bit versus the qubit, two states instead of one, and then learning about the qdit, which is 10 states.
Yeah.
10 states instead of one. And the most striking thing about learning about the qdit, 10 states at once, as opposed to your regular computer, which is one or the other, is that that qdit article was from 2017. Mm-hmm. So this is right on the horizon, but please.
I mean, yeah, I'll say quantum computing, that's something that's going to be able to crack the blockchain.
That was the main.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
I mean, and I think, you know, past year, I would say, and honestly a bit farther back, we've had companies publicly come out and say, we have quantum computing, or we are really close. A bunch of influencers were flown up to Seattle. Microsoft showed them, you know, they have the chip, they have the machine ready.
Wow.
They have the machine ready for quantum computing. If I remember correctly, Google said the same thing a few years ago. They have their quantum computing ready to go. And I think that will be, in terms of evolving technologies, I predict, you know, these are my 2 predictions going forward in the next 10 years. Besides AI, we have quantum computing and robotics. I would say quantum computing comes first, and if not, arrives at the same time as robotics, hand in hand, or robotics would come first. Just really depends. Because honestly, quantum computing, it's, you know, we only know so much right now. You know, we can only, you know, devote so much money to, I mean, it's a very expensive machine. I don't know if you have ever seen what Microsoft put out about their quantum computing machine.
You got to keep it this temperature.
You have to keep it. It's colder. It's as cold as space. It's not colder.
The electronic frequency cannot be disturbed at all. Otherwise, the whole thing is shot.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think that's one of the most, in terms of emerging technology, that will highly impact AI, these prediction markets, and I would say finance, intelligence, and it's all kind of wrapped together. Quantum computing. Once we have quantum computing, I feel like there's a world which we unlock so much about ourselves. Quantum computing enables us to essentially, I would put it like this. A normal computer can do math at a certain speed. Quantum computing can do it just like that. I would say that's one way to understand it. And quantum computing will allow us to do so much in terms of AI, medicine, being able just to accelerate at the rate which quantum computing will allow us to, will be a game changer for humanity. And once one nation has established quantum computing, I think what we'll see is a few things. We will see economic hardship really lighten.
Right.
Because we see it's like I told you earlier, we see all these people, they're like, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, white collar work gone.
There's a big disturbance going on already in the market of remote workers. I mean, a lot of these countries that cornerstones of the economy were sort of built on this sector of workers. India, Kenya, Nigeria is one where AI is now sort of operating.
If it's customer service.
Yeah, if it's but customer service, development to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. It's not even necessarily that we don't need the guy anymore. We need the guy that we already offshore for cheaper, for less hours.
No, exactly.
I had a professor, big Joseph Schumpeter guy, really, really big on innovation. And I remember him showing us a chart where you had sort of the level of government funding into like that basic research, like those basic hurdles that you need to make anything sort of commercially viable. And, just showing us that in general and where that takeoff commercial innovation tends to take place. And then I look at a similar chart for quantum computing funding. And, long story short, the funding fell off globally. In about 2022, it was the same thing with sort of Web3 projects and blockchain and such. And I always I wondered to myself, what are the odds of, or is this the same sort of environment that catalyzes a deep seek moment in which more is done with less? And my initial instinct is to say no, because of the hardware requirements at the moment.
I would say, hardware requirements, that's one thing. We're still learning how to, do quantum computing at some place, at scale. Like, it's not up for production. We can, nail it one time, but, I forget how much it cost Microsoft and Google, but I mean, that cost them a fortune. Mm. But, I think
if it's a fortune to them,
Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's what I'll say is, we have AI right now. AI, it's going to get cheaper. I would say the best way to understand it is this. So historically, over the past like 2-ish years, I forget the name of the law. Storage gets cheaper every 2 years, no matter how big it is. So I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember how much 50 gigabytes of storage used to cost for like, on a thumb drive or something like that a while back?
It was massive. I remember it being massive.
And then now, the standard's like, I need 64 gigs, but I got to pay, it's cheaper now. Mm-hmm. So typically, we see, storage will double every 2 years. I think what we see, and the price of it comes down. I think we see the same thing, with AI, which, AI is going to help us get to quantum computing even faster. It's going to make it cheaper. That's the thing I see with AI, is that it's going to make a lot of things cheaper, but also at the same time, there's going to be a lot of displacement. And if you don't keep up, that's the one thing, I know all these people in Silicon Valley, I have so many friends that are founders, CEOs, directors, and they're building, the tools of the future. These people I went to school with, that I talk to every day, just checking in, seeing how it's going. Some of them making amazing progress. They've gone to Berkeley now, Stanford, they're leading on projects, startups, funding rounds, raising millions of dollars. But when it comes down to it, something they're going to be doing right now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, it's gonna be so fast. And when they look back on it, I'd be like, oh wow, that took me a few months to do. Now I can do that just by typing and just typing something out and it'll be done. I think that's one of the biggest things that we'll see AI speed up to get to quantum computing. And once we are at a good spot, quantum computing will then, to me, I see it as almost, we're running the race, but now, we got some brand new shoes, we're feeling good, and we're just taking off. Because, quantum computing will allow for so much, like I said, advances in medicine, health, because, there's some people that are predicting, with quantum computing and AI within the next 40 years that, we could live to 130. The average person lives to 130, which, and that's like I said,
that's the average, because the average is 70 now, but, plenty of people in your personal life who are in their like 90s. So
yeah, exactly. And, if you can make all these leaps and bounds with AI within the next few years and get to quantum computing, and quantum computing, it goes on the right path and, it starts accelerating and development. Because here's one thing is, we see all these contracts with the government for AI. They understand the use case of it for it as, once whoever has the best model at the end of the day and has the, the globally adopted best typically comes out on top. And it's the future, warfare, medicine, health, money, it's all connected. And I want to go back to that real quickly is quantum computing will then be the next thing on top of that with robotics. Being able to think independently, improve people's financial situations, their health, their medicine. And, a big thing for a lot of the government is fight war smarter. That's, always been the big thing is fight war smarter. We've seen, recently AI used in government. We've both been consultants. Yep. We see how they're using AI. Some places, it's amazing. They're doing leaps and bounds overnight, with analysis for financial models, understanding what needs to go where, in certain projects. So I think that's one big thing is like, once we get to a point with AI, to the point we have quantum computing, I think it's then a game changer. It's like how AI was game changer. I forget what it was. I saw this recently. I saw this past week. I'll have to go back and find it. I'll send it to you. I think it was like all the way back in 2012. Yeah. Oh gosh, I was 9.
Fuck.
I don't know. I remember how old I was, like 9, 10, something like that. And actually, no. Yeah, I would have been 10, I think. I would have been 10 at the time when this article came out and this video came out of when these people were saying, so the timeline matches up. These people were doing AI at Berkeley in 2012. And they already said they fell behind.
Wow.
Because other people were already studying this and doing this. It's like, at the time, we can look back. It's all publicly available in some way, shape, or form. Typically, you could get on Twitter and you can see an email thread from Jensen Huang and Elon Musk going back over a decade talking about OpenAI.
2016. I saw the one from
you can see them talking about OpenAI. Yeah. And, people from 2012, they're like, yeah, I already feel behind. And I'm like, you feel behind? This is 2012. And I'm like, half the people, don't even think this fully exists yet. The only version they think of this that exists is when I log onto Walmart and I'm like talking to the virtual assistant. That's what they think of.
So with the, I remember one of the first times we met, we talked about like media, our favorite shows and TV, and such. And I don't know if I told you, my favorite show was The Wire.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Did I ever tell you what?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I'm very, very fascinated with institutions, and I think that The Wire is like, you've seen it, right?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, shame on you. Because you haven't seen it, let me give you this lens with which to watch it. So you have like a matrix, a 4-part matrix, right? And the matrix is all about institutions. And on the top of the matrix is formal and informal institutions. And then on the side of the matrix is functional and not functional institutions. So you can see there's different combinations there. And I ask you this because I hear you talk about your peers. I hear you talk about, where they're educated and these these are fine institutions and such. I'm very fascinated with the role the institution plays in the development of the economics of the individual. And the data is still very clear in the long term. It's very robust in the direction of more education tends to lead to higher quality of life and more money and all these, more opportunities and all these other things. And the policy mind is okay, on one hand, of course, consider this massive trove of data that tells you these things, but also ask yourself about these phenomena we keep seeing with, high school kids or kids who are in their early 20s and such.
Yeah, they can't read. Some of them can't read, but they can code.
Here's the thing. That's even more nuanced than I was going to take it. I'm glad that you take it there, and we'll continue to dive on top of that. But I mean, I was at Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, Stanford. I dropped out freshman, sophomore year. And so that means that the institution saw me and was like, our selection criteria determines that you qualified. And then you had to go and reject the institution. And then you still go out and do these big things. I'm thinking about, I have an example in my head right now. I'm on Twitter the other day. There's some 16-year-old. He's on, I think, C++ or something, and he's simulating black holes with code, and he's hand coding all of it. He's not even using AI. And I was like, this is the type of kid where, you expect him to go to one of these schools, sure, but he's so poignant with it. It's like, okay, I expect you to go to one of these schools and drop out. And then I hear you running some billion-dollar unicorn company. It made me think about this guy. I knew him. He came around in middle school. I was in one of those school systems where it's you tend to go to school with the same group of people, right?
Yeah.
And this guy, straight A's, nice guy, conscientious guy, really focused dude, kind of a troubled home life, and drops out of school our junior, senior year. And this is a guy who would have had a 3-point whatever. He has scholarships, did all of that. And the immediate reaction from everybody was no, he'll be all right. And it's the same sort of reaction, I think, with these other sort of unicorn, these sort of individuals who are very, very exceptional, but for some reason, this institution isn't working for me. I go my own way and I still strike it big anyway. My question is why do you think, again, from somebody who would have been peers with some of these people, why do you think that the institutions are incompatible? What about them is, doesn't need to be cultivated by these things, just goes out and does these things? And, is this something that can be reproduced at scale? I've got a lot of people in education, and frankly, if we can figure this out, make a whole lot of money.
Well, honestly, my understanding, I've seen people drop out. They go on to start a $1 million company. And it doesn't matter. It could be in,
What do these people share in common? What are you saying?
A lot of, and it is difficult. It's these, these people that are great students. For me, from what I see is, I think a lot of people that I know, it's a very early ambition to understand a lot. Because I have a perfect example here. Scrolling on LinkedIn earlier, right before I came here, I see there is a young man in Y Combinator. Forget which class year he was in. He sold his first company when he was, I think, 14. And he's from Tajikistan.
Interesting. Soviet bloc, former Soviet bloc.
Sold his first company for I think a few $100,000 at 14. He started building again at 15.
If I remember correctly, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are bigger geographically. Tajikistan is rather small.
And, this kid, he got I forget what it was, but he got an award from, his country for being the top student and, leading the way in technology. And, now he's building companies left and right. I've gone to events, I like I said, I told you, I think it really depends on the person. I've gone to, these events, sponsored by, NVIDIA or some other company, and I'll get up, someone will have a panel, I'll be listening, because I think that's where you can really learn a lot about these people. And I think there's a lot of, different characteristics of a lot of these people. It depends on the background. I feel like, in the Bay Area, I was only there for a few years, just off school, but like the amount of people, I forget, I wish I remember the guy's name now, but I dropped, well, no, like, once I was out of school and everything, I look on LinkedIn, he's got a multi-million-dollar company now. We graduated together and everything. He's got a multi-million-dollar company just like that, and he's worked on it for 6 years now. So ever since he was in high school, he's been working on this. And so I think for a lot of people is that very early ambition for success. And I think it also depends on your environment. So for example, the San Francisco Bay Area,
right?
That is one of the areas where technology moves at a faster rate really quickly within the Bay Area. But the moment you get outside of the Bay Area, it takes a while for the technology to spread across the country.
A lot of stuff I was seeing about these new models was coming out of that area.
Exactly. You're going to see a lot of stuff, they'll get access to it beforehand, before it even hits general public. It just depends on who you know and what you can get access to. Mm-hmm. So I say that's one of the bigger things is it's the culture that you grew up around. And I also think it's your environment. Like, we say, there are certain regions of the country, we say like, Silicon Valley area, that is the place of innovation and technology.
Right.
That is what we know it as. That is what people outside of the United States know it as. And when you grow up in that environment, I think that is one of those things that, really, it's one of the building blocks for you of life. Everyone's building blocks are different, I feel like. So, if you grow up in DC, a lot of your life is going to be centered around the government. It's going to be centered around the federal government and, what all is happening. You want to be policy involved. The odds are, if you grew up around the federal government, you might have been moving around with your parents depending on what position you're in and where you're at. But, a lot of these people, your environment really gives you that grounding and that understanding. Mm. So I think for some people, you'll have always those one-off cases. You'll have that one person from your school, they'll go on to start something insane. And then, you look at him in 30 years from now and you're like, wow, I went to school with this guy? All I knew him was for being the dork that had a 3.0.
And not even a 3.9 is the interesting part, a 3.0.
Yeah. And so I think it's, some of these people also, the tools that they have access at their fingertips is that they make the, most use of them. But I think, even in today's age, you can learn anything on the internet. AI can help teach you. YouTube can teach you. You can learn all this online.
Definitely.
So I would say that's, one thing is you have the resources at your fingertips. I think it depends on the environment you grow up in. So, if it's grow up in a big, tech culture, hustle culture, just really depends on, where you're at in the country or just in life at the time. Because, I found out, a lot of, founders that I know that I went to undergrad with, a lot of them had that ambition from a very young age. Is they've been dreaming about starting their own, having their own company since they were 10 because they grew up in the Bay Area. And they were like, I love tech. I love the rush that founding gets me. It's like, I'm gonna go back to actually, these conferences I go to. I forget the woman's name, but she has founded 3 companies and sold them all off. Not even for the money. She likes doing it.
Just likes the rush.
She likes the rush that she gets from it of building something. Because here's the one thing I'll always say is if you have an idea, take it to market. Because that's when you're really going to learn what your true idea is. Because the market's going to reward you if it's a good idea or bad idea. If it's a good idea, you're going to succeed. If it's a bad idea, the market's going to tell you and you need to pivot.
I just a quick tangent. I've read The Wealth of Nations twice. And every time, both times I've read it, I felt more in tune with what you just said than this just simple give me more sort of aspect of things. Like, this is how we determine value in a societal sense, and so as far as taking things to market. But please go ahead. You were talking about.
Yeah, it's like a lot of these people, like, you can take something to market. It could be your first idea ever. It could just be, an app. It could be a service. Because, I think, there's a few companies out there that I can think of, they started out with one product. And if you look at them today, they're doing something completely different. Mm-hmm. I mean, something that just kind of comes
Amazon, for example.
Yeah, Amazon. I mean, that was books.
Books.
That was books. Like that's a tech company that's, they they're the giant, they're the biggest retailer in the world now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think also like a few other companies come to mind. I mean, Lamborghini used to make tractors.
Did not know that. Wow.
They were a tractor manufacturer.
Did they make good tractors?
Yes.
Well, I imagine so.
But when you think of Lamborghini, you don't think of a tractor. You think of a sports car on the road.
Yeah.
That's obnoxiously loud.
It's sleek. It's sexy.
Exactly.
It's high status. It's it's high performance. I really ask myself sometimes as far as where the technology is going now, because there's two sides of I guess the conversation we're having. There's the people who build the technology, and then the people who have to then use the technology in the market, deploy these use cases, purchase these products, and sort of go about their lives with these things. And it's just, it was pretty ironic to me. I was thinking today how a couple of years ago, if you engaged with AI, everybody was really concerned about security. Mm-hmm. Everybody was like, hey, don't do this, don't upload this in there. Everything's got to be explainable. Everything's got to have some sort of redundancy to it. There's got to be fail-safe. There's got to be sort of that human touch there. And now a couple of years later, I mean, we've gotten so many capabilities. Things have gotten so complex that the convenience offered, the use cases offered, simply along
it outweighs it.
Yeah, along with the cost, you simply have to just present them a bigger attack surface. Even some of this stuff, it's okay, we'll connect your wallet, messages, social media, and you read these, you read horror stories, creepypastas of things going rogue, inserting malicious code, and you never saw the malicious code because the output that it put towards you was some sort of other iteration of that. Where should cybersecurity education begin? Because you've worked in cybersecurity a little bit, you got trained on legacy systems, but you're also young enough that, hey, I'm cutting edge on what's going on right now. What are the biggest threats right now? What do we need to know as far as just the general public in terms of cybersecurity? And where is that going?
I would say in terms of cybersecurity, I'm going to go back to here. AI. AI is going to transform how cybersecurity works. I mean, I know there's test cases within the government of how can we best utilize AI for cyber attacks or cyber defense. Mm-hmm. Because, and that's one of the biggest things is if I can continuously, attack your system, what are you going to do about it? I just have something that's just running nonstop trying to break in. I would say that's one of the biggest things when it comes to cyber is, AI, you got to start people, relatively soon. Because I mean, and I think this applies just to even day-to-day life. AI is just going to get better.
Yeah.
That's the hard truth of it. AI 6 months from now is going to look completely different. AI 6 years from now is going to look completely different. 60 years from now is going to look insane, I imagine. But to me, I think, a few basics, understanding, the basics of cybersecurity and also just intelligence. I would say, honestly, this is more intelligence based than cybersecurity, is you need to understand all pieces, of how the puzzle comes together, I would say, is the biggest thing. Because I get these cybersecurity readings every day, get an email. I'm just the latest up-to-date things. If I went into my phone right now and I showed you, they would all be about how AI is changing the landscape of cybersecurity. Because that is, if it's like I told you, if you can just have something continuously run different, types of attacks or, set up different lines of defense, in a sense, figuratively speaking, to defend your network or anything along those lines, I would say that's insane. Because, I know there's places out there that are using it right now. Or we could, I think might have been Govini. They big into defense, big into AI. I can't remember if they have a cyber practice or not. But you know, their whole, like, a lot of people, you can go on LinkedIn, you can look up AI cyber like analyst, or you know, and you'll see something about it. It's like, I would say that is the biggest thing that it honestly needs to be taught, is how to use AI in the best use case scenario of you know, when it comes to these situations in cybersecurity, is like AI is going to take out essentially everything that, you know, we used to, like, you know, that was done before, and automate it.
Automation is a big part of that attack surface that I'm thinking of there. So, but you know, it's obviously not all doom and gloom. There are some good use cases that can come about there. There are some, again, there are just some displays of this technology at its best. Now, when I say that phrase, this technology at its best, what comes to mind in terms of what makes life better for people? Are there any use cases that you see domestically, abroad? Are there any innovators that you personally know? Maybe it hasn't come to market yet, but they're working on, you know, these sort of, you know, these sort of public goods, these sort of user enhancements.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually. I know of a few. Fortunately, can't say anything.
Don't say that. You don't have to say the names.
Unfortunately, can't say anything.
Conceptually.
Conceptually, I think, you know, when it comes to, you know, the human body, the human brain, and where we are going with technology, I mean, my number one example is Neuralink.
How do you? It's you know, I get you, and it makes sense, and it's like. But, you know, it's like, how do you overcome the apprehension of just like, hey, don't hook this thing up to my brain? And of course, that's not the question.
I think it's you have to weigh the cost of it. It's, you know, how much do you trust something? How much trust are you willing to put into something? So, you know, Neuralink, you know, chip in the brain, works off electrical waves of your brain, and knows how to, so you know how to control things. You know, with the screen, you play ping pong, you play Angry Birds. Play whatever you want. I would say, you know, for a lot of people, you know, if I unfortunately one day lost mobility in, you know, parts of my body, and, you know, you looked at me and, you know, say I couldn't talk or anything like that, and, you know, I'm with a loved one, and, you know, for some people, it's just like, you know, just being able to say a simple "I love you" still in some way, shape, or form. It's really about the human aspect of it. Is a lot of people would be willing, I feel like, to sacrifice, you know, part of, you know, their safety, their security, you know, just for, you know, that convenience of having a life again. Because I mean, I know people, they have tags in their hands. I mean, they have NFC tags in their hands, so they don't have to carry around keys or anything like that to open their doors, open everything. I mean, right now, like, you know, I'm wearing an Oura Ring. I'm wearing an Apple Watch as well. My health data is somewhere in the world right now. You know, this, you know, Apple, they're holding my health data somewhere, and Oura Ring, they're holding my health data somewhere. I think it comes with a trade-off. So for instance, my Oura Ring right now, it's information, you know, that I want to know. It's like, what do I want to know? But they're also going to end up knowing it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Apple Watch. Is, you know, I want to know this. It's like, you know, I want to know how stressed out I am during the day when it gets to a certain time of the day. If I'm super stressed out at night, if I'm doing some extra work, I want to know my heart rate. I want to know all these things so I can better improve myself. It's like the convenience for some people, or the knowledge that you don't have, because, you know, I would say going back to the medical field is a lot of these people, you know, going back, I mean, 30, 40 years from now, like, if you wanted to know just some basic medical stuff about yourself, you'd have to go in, you know, call ahead, send a letter, you know, super long in advance just to, you know, get an appointment, and, you know, then you might know. But, you know, as we've come to, you know, the future and the present now, I could know someone's having a heart attack just by the watch they're wearing. So I think, you know, it's like the safety, the convenience, and what you're willing to share about yourself, you know, to some of these companies. It's like, you know, Apple, you know, thankfully, you know, they can detect it. Your watch can detect if you're having a heart attack. For some people and their loved ones, that's worth knowing. You know, would you sacrifice, you know, some personal data that you won't even know how it's ever used? You probably won't know how it's ever used. Apple, you know, they're secure about their data. They don't like, you know, selling that stuff out. How would you feel about, you know, wearing this watch just for a little bit, or this ring, and, you know, having just being aware enough to the point that you could monitor someone's health in the point of crisis, that they're having a heart attack and they need to go to the hospital, and, you know, this watch could save them, and you could have a few more years with them. Like, you know, is that trade-off worth it to you?
I think there's definitely a zoom in that is necessary there. I just want to go back to the institutional piece just for a second there, and this going more in terms of people, because what you just said is, you know, as someone, or if someone was to be at the head of the company that was to make such a decision. Now, Apple is, of course, a very extreme example, but even at a smaller scale, whether it's this or that founder having to make that decision, that question is kind of the central fundamental business question. Mm-hmm. You need somebody to ask that question in order to have this company. You also need somebody to build the sort of technology there. You know, a lot of, in terms of tech founders, we see high levels of technical skill. You know these people. You're in social circles with large people. Where do they get their how do they, I guess, cultivate their business skills? Because a lot of these people you see purely tech people, or you know, sometimes you see people rise to the top of companies who are not the most technologically advanced staff in their company. There's, you know, they know what they're doing, of course, but the hardcore technicians are in that middle brow there. Where are these skills coming from? How do you cultivate these skills in new innovators? And sort of specifically, you know, how are these things playing out in the real, I guess, wild west of that founding?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. So, you know, a lot of these people that, you know, a lot of these innovators I know, this isn't their first rodeo.
But what about for the people who it is? I mean,
a lot of people, from my experience, there's kind of been 3 to 4 different paths. One, try and fail. You're going to learn as you go. And that's just the hard truth of it. You're going to fail. You're going to fail quick, and you're going to learn quick. You're going to learn what works, and you're going to learn what doesn't work. And that's the same thing with, like, you know, some of their ideas, you know, their go-to-market ideas. It's like I said, you got to put it out there if you want to know. So I would say that's one thing is, you know, they know they can take a risk and learn. If it doesn't, you know, work out with one investor, they can always email another. They can call another. The second path I always see is they've been exposed to the business aspect their whole life through their family. And that is a very large one. You know, a lot of good friends of mine, you know, their dads will own multi-million houses in Napa because, you know, they're the president or the CEO of a VC or a private equity company, and they've always been exposed to, you know, that business side. And, you know, good friend of mine, I mean, you can just, he could call his dad and he get whatever he wants. And, you know, then that sparks his innovation because, you know, for him, he wanted to do his own thing. He learned what he wanted to, and now he's going to go out and experiment. And that's the thrill that, you know, he gets. He can test and test and test and test because he has the business knowledge to fall back on of, you know, I know how to conduct a deal. I know what to say, you know, I know what to do. You know, I know how to treat these people to, you know, make them understand what I'm trying to sell my vision of. And then I would say the third path is a lot of mentorship. You know, I've had multiple mentors, love them. They teach you so much. And I would actually also throw Y Combinator in that mix. Is you could have, you know, a company and go to apply to Y Combinator. It doesn't mean Y Combinator is going to accept you.
Sure.
But Y Combinator teaches you so much, and mentors teach you so much. I worked for a company that was in Y Combinator while I was in undergrad called Ohana, subleasing platform. Love them. Love Ezra, love Jacob. Great people. You know, they were at McKinsey and Apple, you know, working, you know, on the iPad and stuff and, you know, consulting projects. just two kids that went to summer camp together. They built their first product in their dorm. They had no experience. Whatsoever. And they built their first product in their dorm and they sold it off. And then that was the base institutional knowledge that, launched, their idea of, we could do this. And they applied to Y Combinator, got in, and then they got a lot of mentorship. And they go around giving back that mentorship. They were recently at Harvard, I think it was. Or, they go to all these, high profile events like, Ivy League schools, these private funding events, these accelerators, and they hear from all these people. One thing that I think, Ezra and Jacob, prime example, their company, one of their main investors is Spencer Raskoff. Spencer Raskoff, founder of Airbnb. Well, co-founder of Airbnb. So he lends, his advice, support to them all the time. They hear from all these excellent people that have had excellent ideas that are now just giving them the advice that they heard. And it has also worked for them that, or that they could help pivot them to help them succeed. So I really think, it's a combination of all those things, like mentorship, the environment you grow up in, and also just having the courage to test and fail.
Definitely. This is my last question for you, and it's kind of a build off of that last one there. Now, that all makes sense, and I appreciate those insights as far as like people who are very, very technical. But I remember in undergrad myself meeting a gentleman. We went to sort of like this incubator event for an advertising agency. And they bring in this guy. They say, this guy, this really creative guy. And he was. But, he was interesting because his whole thing was, when I was coming out of undergrad, I was at Harvard. And I was an English major. And my senior year, my senior year, I went to for my thesis. I think he made like a rap album for his thesis, and this guy ended up a software engineer at Google, working like exclusively on tech. He's like, I never coded before, and I was like, I said to myself at the time, I was like, well, hey, Google, I don't think that they would have made it to where they are, nor could they maintain where they currently are if they just hired a bunch of dummies, a bunch of careless people, a bunch of people who would just hire anybody. So it was like, what specifically did they see in non-technical staff that they could identify and say, hey, this person is correct for cultivation. This makes sense for us to invest time and resources in this person, even from, again, far outside of our peer view. Like I said, this guy was a creative writer. He'd worked on, media projects in that sense, but he ended up working on, again, a highly technical sort of staff. What did they select for based on what you know from, people in the tech field, from what you know about the industry, from what you as a practitioner might go and say, okay, yeah, you're not necessarily in this field, but there are clearly skills here that are useful?
I would say there's a few things. One of the things is your ability to learn quick and also fail quick, and being okay with that. Because, there's things on the job you're going to just mess up. Everyone messes up. And it's also being okay with that, and also understanding that this stuff is just going to keep evolving 24/7, no matter what. So I would say that's one thing, is that everything's going to keep evolving. You got to be able to, to fail quick. And then I would say, being willing and being coachable. That is such an undervalued thing, I feel like. Because a lot of people, it's like, I want to hustle, get out everything that I can, everything I want in life. But, some of these people, they just want to learn it. Because some people are so fascinated by it. For me, one thing I've always kind of been fascinated about is obviously, astronomy. Would I love the chance to go work at NASA for a month? Absolutely. Learn everything I could, but I know it's not all pictures looking at the stars. I know it's, complicated mathematical calculations to, measure, how fast the light's coming in from space. So I feel like, it's for some people taking their base understanding, seeing where they're at, and seeing how you can mold them and incubate them, like you said. You got to be able to, can this person learn this? And if they can learn it quick, but or if they could even learn it slow, Are they okay with that? Are they okay with the fact that things are going to change on a whim? Absolutely. I think that's one thing that allows a lot of these people to like, go into this, this incubator is, being able to be mentored. I think that is one of the biggest things, having a mentor, just being coachable. But also just having those basic skills that you just pick up. I'm like, you're not a software engineer, but if you, back then, if you could, just learn enough to, show me that, you want this, I would say that's also one of the other things is like, show me how, like, for some people, it's like, how badly do you want it? I would say that's, those are a few of the things that come to my mind is like, how badly do you want it? Are you willing to put in the extra time to learn it? And, how much can you learn about it in such a short amount of time? Be coachable, learn all these things, learn everything you can about it to really put together, a great product, you could go to market with it. I think that, that's one of those things about those incubators. It is a high amount of people that want something so badly, but also they're so coachable within, that frame of their life. They're very impressionable. You can leave such a good impression on them, to the point that, you can, in confidence, your friend wasn't a software engineer, but, look at him, Google hired him. They must have saw something in him.
Yeah.
I think that's just, some of those things that, like some people look for is, can they coach, how fast do they learn? And, how badly do they want it? Like, are they willing to learn this right now?
I was just thinking about a title for this episode. I'm going to entitle this Going to Market with Alex Allen. Alex, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Of course.
The Money and Breakfast podcast.